Hey friends, this is Joseph Maynor. So what I want to do in this video is I want to react on what we've been working on, or what I've been working on this week. So this is all recent kind of insight for me. And obviously I'm always having insights. But when I make a video, what I'm trying to do is it's actually a very unique position. It's taking my insights and sharing them with the other, or with you, right? So it's this desire to relate that creates a lot of this kind of game of needing to be so focused on probing reality. Because when you're by yourself, you're not probing reality so much, right? You're just with yourself. So the question is, when we probe reality, do we ruin reality on some level? And I think there's a yes and no here, and you can see why there are people who differ on this. But also, too, probing reality is the masculine, right? So, on some level, and also, not probing reality is the masculine, too. This realization that talk doesn't define me. So you see how this stuff all circles around, right? It's not just like a linear understanding. There's different octaves of understanding. Understanding, there's different layers of understanding almost. And not two. Because when we probe reality on some level, we do ruin it, right? See, there's always a way to refute any argument. You don't need an argument to be. Let's just take the elephant out of the room. There's a lot that's going on here. There's a need to be social. There's a need to make money. There's a need to be entertaining. There's a need to create. But ultimately, those needs have nothing to do with you being you. So really, it comes down to this issue of being in the world versus intellect. Being in the world is the feminine, the personal, the intuitive, the practical. Intellect is always trying to add a layer to this, like the sales proposition from the intellect, which is masculine, is you need to know more to be well. You need to know more to be well. Do you see why the feminine can very easily overturn this? There are spiritual teachers out there that make a living off of this. This hole. It's a hole in the masculine. The masculine doesn't realize that there's a feminine hole, right? There's a little bit of the feminine that is required to be in the masculine. See, the masculine gets carried away and thinks that it can just drive the train without, with blinders on. Social blinders on. Without realizing, no, without a relation to yourself, you wouldn't be here either. So the individual on some level has a bit of the relation within it, or the node has a little bit of the link within it. This is all yin-yang kind of Chinese philosophy, right? The Chinese were very wise. Chinese philosophy is not often taught in the West, nor is it taught in Indian philosophy, right? I mean, it's the three big areas of world philosophy definitely are Western, Indian, Chinese philosophy, those traditions. So one of the great things that I did, I don't know, like 20 years ago, or I mean, it seems like that long, but it was probably more like 10 years ago, is I studied the shit out of all these schools of philosophy. You know, I traveled around, I educated my mind. I mean, I'm not, on some level, I'm kind of hyping myself, but on some level, I'm not too. I'm just describing my path, what I did, right, to help me. But I think ultimately, and what we're going to talk about in this video is playing games and the difference between spirituality and playing a game, and why intuition and skill are kind of at odds. Now, depending on how you're teaching people, right, this factors in, because you can't teach everybody the same. See, this is this kind of Kantian modernity philosophy thing where it's like, well, you know, we can just rely on reason and logic and then everybody can be taught the same. Well, how convenient for you as a teacher, right? Nobody's the same. See? This idea that everybody is the same is your, right, pipe dream there. That's a huge assumption that there's another and there's me and we're all the same. And that we can all be sort of like, there's a one-size-fits-all spirituality and many other things that can be conveyed the same. And actually what you'll find is that this is like not the case at all. That really you have to become sort of aware of yourself as a unique individual and listen to your intuition and privilege your own intuition too. And this requires judgment, and this is why judgment is so complicated. Judgment cannot be reduced to some language or some theory. See, this is the thing. There's always going to be somebody who's going to tell you that your judgment can be reduced to, or your intuition can be reduced to, some external. Now, is it useful to listen to other perspectives? If you decide that's the good, then yes, it is. If not, then it is what it is. So be careful of, your need to socially relate is actually screwing you up too. Because you're playing the game. And in playing the game, you go beyond your intuition. And you go into the realm of skill. Now, this isn't bad necessarily. It depends on what you're doing and what you're considering to be a game. So we're about a third of the way through the video, friends. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a break. I'll come back and we'll continue. Just give me 1 second. All right, friends. So welcome back. So what I want to do now is I want to talk about the relation between direct experience and intuition. Well, Direct experience doesn't capture intuition. So yes, direct experience is feminine, right? It's paying attention to experience, which is feminine. But the direct part is restricting, because the feminine gut, or what we might call intuition, is a lot more complex than some people seem to have access to. I don't know why this is the case. We're not all the same. Some people, people have different strengths and weaknesses. Some people are very strong in the intellect. Some people are very strong in being in the world. But the intellect, I think there are certain people that have a blind spot with regard, just like, people have a blind spot with regard to music, maybe, if they're not musicians, or visual art, if they're not visual art people, or social skills, if they're not social people. It's like we all have like a profile of strengths and weaknesses. And so there's this kind of hope, which I think is actually wrong, that there's this one size fits all answer that can be provided through reason, which is actually what the essence of modernity was. Is that through reason we can correct people's intuition. But let me explain to you why this is wrong. It's because intuition is personal. You can't correct intuition using philosophy. You can correct somebody's understanding of how to bake a pie, how to play some kind of opening in chess through reason. You might change somebody's mind about playing a particular game through reason. But being you is not a game. Your relationship between you can be a game, but it doesn't have to be. So this idea of playing a game, outsourcing ourselves to the link. See, this comes from not being sure, not having the right knowledge, right? I'm not sure if I'm right or wrong, right? And that just gives the opening for you to buy into this whole kind of thing where it's I can be told how to be me. Yes and no, but the problem is you have to get this right, There are many ways where people get this wrong. There's certain things that definitely are not a game. You living your life is not a game. Game is a mentality. And it's not always bad. And actually, when we play a game, and I'm going to devote the last half of this video to this kind of practical thing. There are certain characteristics to that, and it's not always bad to play a game. But I think we need to realize too, what game playing is, and why there's a distinction between being in the world and intellect, because game playing involves the intellect. Probing reality, which ruins reality on some level, right? Because you're clouding people's ability to accept themselves and their sovereignty and their intuition by using your reason or your language because you want something from them, right? Now, there's nothing bad with wanting something. It's just you have to realize that when it comes to spirituality, spirituality cannot be conceptualized by another. Like another can give you pointers to spirituality for sure. But you're not going to get a philosophy or a logical proof for the idea that your intuition is your link to God. And your decision as to your taste as to how you want to communicate that should be left to you. That's where we get plurality. That's where we get all these different sort of like authentic perspectives that we really want, right? That's what we want to encourage as sharers, is for people to blossom into what they, ultimately will be. But truth is about being aligned with that too. And all of us have a different taste. All of us have a different intuition as to what that should be. So in a way, I'm starting to realize that, taste has a big factor into how you decide to be social, for better or for worse. And that actually reason is your taste. And people have tried to use that throughout history too, in ways that have had pros and cons. So, we have a lot of history as to how people use reason to conceptualize spirituality for another. So there's this tension between the personal and the objective. We realize that there's a way that people can have say-so that's right. But if that say-so is right, the implication is that you're playing a game. Now, being you is not a game, though. You may decide to play a game as you. Somebody else may try to play a game with you so that you're praising them, right? So be careful with spiritual pipe dreaming, in the sense that direct experience does point to something. It points to the fact that you have to clear out your own windows. It's like wiping your own windows so that you can see clearly and that you can perceive clearly. And you can perceive the other clearly too. Sometimes. So this, in a way, is a kind of a masculine move. I mean, this is not the final perspective. It's just a very high level masculine. I call it stage Dusty Rose. But there definitely is a difference. There's a difference between being able to witness and see and hear and being connected up with your intuition versus playing a game in the world. So what I want to do in the last part of this video is I want to talk about game playing, my experience with it, and how to best think about it and do it from my perspective. So just give me 1 second. All right, friends, welcome back. So one of my favorite accounts of game was reading the later Wittgenstein. And he talks about this concept of a game, like what constitutes a game. It's kind of a skeptical account. But ultimately, like, there's a you that's playing a game, right? Or there's an experience of playing a game, but the experience is not the game. Notice this. So, is the experience of you playing a game direct experience, or does it involve thought too? Well, I would say it's a joining of both. Like, stop thinking that direct experience doesn't involve thought. I mean, intuition is your link to God, right? Without intuition, you wouldn't have any guidance. Now, the presupposition is that the guidance is wrong from some perspective if you're playing a certain game. If you're not playing a game, then don't internalize this that way. Not everything is a game. Spirituality is not a game for you. It's not a game for others either. This is a problem with teaching spirituality, is that this is the one subject area that is not a game. I mean, in a way, philosophy is a game, right? But spirituality cannot be a game because it's all about you directly perceiving you, which is the one thing that is not a game. Now, but everything else in a way is a kind of game. So your insights and your intuition are not a game. Your telos, right? Your feeling of it's not even telos. Telos is a little too masculine because it implies a certain kind of statement and language about something. Your guidance, though, your inner guidance, that's not a game. So the key is to find things in the world that either you enjoy playing as a game or that you can gamify to better your life. So, like, for example, if you play video games or you play board games or you play music, in a way, those are all games. So, and they're going to involve, like, the intersection between intuition and skill. Because the whole idea of a game is that you can get better at the game, right? Like, results matter in any kind of a game. But do results matter with you listening to yourself? Not at all, right? Results seem like an unnecessary, like, expectation to, you just being yourself. Like when you get your insights from God or your intuition or however you want to frame that, like, do you say to yourself, like, what kind of results does this have to do anything with? No, you're just grateful for the fact that you got some kind of insight, right? It might be wrong. If we impose a certain kind of reason to it, There are ways that we're all strong, and where there was ways that we're all weak, but you can't deny the fact that that was your insight. And you can't let other people control how your insight works, because if other people control how your intuition works, what they're telling you is that the way for you to be is to be like them. So they cancel your listening, your ability to even listen for your own insights and your own intuition. They cut you off. You cut yourself off by believing in them, right? They convince you, listen to me, be like me, and you'll be fine. Well, you can't do that in spirituality. I'm sorry. It's just never going to work. That's a devil move. It's always going to be a devil move. I mean, if you caveat it in a certain way, like I'm just giving you my perspective, but yeah, spirituality is not philosophy. It involves philosophical issues, obviously, but it can't be philosophy, because ultimately the game of philosophy is to tell other people what the dealio is, right? So it's an overextension of intellect onto being in the world. It's like, and a good example of, like, if you probe it, you ruin it, right? You take away people's internal compass and you make their compass your compass. This is like such an old game. This is the game that the dictator plays, right? The dictator is the masculine. I'm going to dictate to you in language what the truth is. And I'm this exciting, charismatic masculine who draws these people to make a link with him and to kind of like preserve that link through giving him kudos for being himself. When really, that's unnecessary, actually, from a spiritual perspective. You don't need any kudos to be yourself. You don't need any kudos to be yourself. All you need is good ears, right? You need ears. You need to be able to listen, see? You need to have that connection to yourself, unimpaired. You need to be able to, like, tell your truth without being afraid. But when you're playing a game, you do need skill. And where does the skill come from? Does it come from knowledge? Well, not entirely. I mean, if you're playing chess, your skill is going to be an intersection between your intuition and the game itself. And so it sets up a practice. There's got to be a practice. If you want to get good at any game, you got to practice and perform. And you also need to know yourself, because if you're not, you don't want to do anything that you're not motivated to do, right? So this is where you need intuition. And then the skill is going to be taking the knowledge and breaking it down into improving at that game. Whether it's chess, whether it's Minecraft, whether it's playing jazz trumpet, whether it's being good in any particular kind of career. Like, knowledge without being broken down into skill, if you're playing a game, is foolish. Because you're playing a game. You got to be like conscious, like when you're playing a game and when you're not playing a game. Like when you're doing your spirituality, you're not playing a game. But if you're trying to get good at some kind of a profession or something like that, or you're trying to get good at chess, or you're trying to get good at playing jazz trumpet, or you're trying to get good at being a YouTuber or being a public intellectual, I mean, these are all games. See? There's nothing wrong with the game, but like don't gamify things that are not games, and recognize when things are games, and to get into the gaming mentality when things are games, so that you can actually improve and chunk down your knowledge into skill instead of being distracted by knowledge that never becomes skill. Okay, friends? Hopefully this was a good video. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.